Right.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Gil Noble, Louis Rivera, El Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, birthday wish for Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Amos Wilson, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and all the individuals that gave up fame and fortune to bring truth to power and information to their people. They didn't have to do that, but they sacrificed a lot. So we try to keep their name alive. And in honor of Viola Maddox, who believed in the physical of lectures. She drove an old car all the way from Paterson, New Jersey, every Wednesday to the United African Movement, because she believed in lectures. She believed, can you mute yourself, Zoom? She believed in people coming out. So we honor, and that's why we still keep lectures going, so we honor these people. Now, we're going to bring the camera over here, right, with family, to the Amos collection. These books we sell to help Sababa continue the work of Amos Wilson. We have Blueprint for Black Power, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, Falsification of African Consciousness, Issues of Manhood in Black and White, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat, the new one Sababa finished, Toward the Reclamation of the African Mind, Developmental Psychology of Black Children, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, Amos Classic, Black on Black Violence. We also have Confronting the Color Crisis in the African Diaspora, Etta Dixon, I'm a Wellness Witness, S.K. Damiano Cruum, Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmetology, Revealing the Unspeakable Bible Verses, and in honor of Louis Rivera, Jazz in Jail. We also have Dr. McCullough, The Truth About COVID-19, Exposing the Great Reset, Lockdown, Vaccine Passport. We also have one of the best-selling books on the Times, on the Real Anthony Fauci, New York Times bestseller. We have that, and we have a brother out of Georgia named Dr. Scott Whitaker. His book is titled Medicine, The Ugly Truth About Facebook. And Dr. Randy Short, Slavery Mastery, and Impact of Religious and Slavery Revealed. So we have these books to try to keep the information flowing, because family is always about information. We also have the DVDs on Dr. Lewis's band videos that YouTube did not want to put on. We have his DVDs here, and they're spoken. So I got something here on why we Haitians continue to protest the Clintons. We have information here from our sister Deidre. I got a couple of community events. Tomorrow, family, we have Thorough Black Talk on YouTube. Tad, Keisha, and Ashe. One of the hottest shows on the East Coast. Facebook Live, 8 o'clock. Also, Saturday, on Blog Talk Radio, we have Sister Empress Chi, New Day Resurrection on Blog Talk. Comes on at 10:30. You go into Blog Talk, you come down, and you type in Empress Chi, and New Day Resurrection come on, and that's at 10:30 on Saturdays, and sometimes they go all the way to 12, 1:30 at night. Excellent program. Also, African Echoes with Trust Graham. That's a study group on Fridays and on Saturdays. So all these programs are coming down. Also, Community Cop, every Tuesday on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Hottest show on the East Coast. Everybody watches it. That's with Brother Mike Graves and Noel Leader. So we have this information coming down for people to participate. Now, we're coming in to, on the Cash App, on people on Zoom, Keisha, put my Cash App in there, please, if you can. Donate to the William Mackey Jr.'s History Club and help us out. Whatever you give is appreciative. That'll help us keep us going. Now, without further ado, our keynote speaker tonight is one of the co-founding members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, and he has the hottest show, him and Nobel, on the East Coast, from Georgia going all the way up to New York. And his topic is going to be the real Martin Luther King, because we have a lot of his birthdays coming up, and you're going to have everybody from this church and that church talking about I march with Dr. King. I did this and that. Come out and vote. The Democratic Party still stagnating in their bullshit. So, Mike agreed to come back and do the lecture on the real Dr. Martin Luther King. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring the speaker on until about 9 o'clock. We're going to have little refreshments after that. We're going to do a collection, and then he's going to come back and do his question and answer. Without further ado, Zoom audience and the people that's here, give a great big hand to our keynote speaker, Brother Mike Gray. Woo! Check us in the mail, brother. Check us in the mail.
Yeah, Big Mike.
Hey,
Brother Mike.
Yes. Good to see you, whoever's on Zoom. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
And you should mute yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
Ray, you need to adjust the camera, bro. Adjust the computer, because it's off to the book section, not facing Mike. There we go, much better.
All right, we ready? Say I am.
I am.
Because we are.
We are.
Try it again.
I am.
I am. Because we are. And true words were never spoken, and if you're not aware of that, then this is the place to be, because without me there's no you, without you there's no me, and we are the sum total of all the contributions that our community has given and laid down for eons and eons. We are not the Johnny-come-lately people that so many of us look up to. We have been around long before them. They're the latest people on the planet. And we're going to talk about some things. But first I want to be proper and correct, and first say that there's somebody that we need to acknowledge, and it would be an absolute robbery not to acknowledge this person. This person loved black people, and cared and lived the kind of life that we would exemplify and look up to. This person loved especially black children and protected them and did everything to educate them. And that person's name is Leola Maddox. And this is her birthday.
Wow.
So let's... And certainly it would be more than a robbery, it would be a crime if we didn't remember in his absence, which is now, wow, around 21 years. But as long as he has been gone, he is still remembered and revered by so many of us. And that person's name is Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad. Great man. Now, Dr. Khalid, just to say a few words about him, you can't be more sincere than Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad was and is. You can't be. You might reach just as, but I don't know anyone more sincere. Everything they said, they meant it, because I saw him in action. And the very words, the things that you would hear him speak about, he lived it. Now, do most people that are speaking live the life that they speak about? Do most preachers live that life that they preach about? It's a resounding no. But Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad lived that life. I'm not making it what he's not. I'm just telling you what I know. And I wish I could share some of the examples. I wish I could. You know, some of them are things better left unsaid. And when it is said, it should be in very small, intimate circles. Because certain things you just don't put out. We got cameras on. Who knows in the world who's listening? So can't really share some of the things that I would love to share with you about Dr. Khalid. But just trust me when I say everything he said, he meant it. And so when you see pictures of Khalid, which are still out there, of him going to Texas after a black man, James Byrd, his body was dragged through the streets. You don't even do that to a dog. You don't kill a dog and then drag the dog in the street. You hide that crime because you're ashamed of it, and you know that you just can't broadcast what you just did. Well, they did that. They dragged this black man so long that his body parts started falling off of his body. Dragging him on a truck. I probably should have mentioned that. They weren't dragging. They were dragging him on a truck, broadcasting that they had just killed him. And Dr. Khalid was so incensed by what he saw, he took a crew down there. And they were armed to the teeth. And so he meant business. When he confronted white militias, which y'all probably seen those images too, he meant it. He was nothing to play with. When he spoke about the devil, he meant it. It wasn't no mild-mannered, milquetoast statements when he talked about the devil and what needed to be done by our people. He really believed in self-defense. He believed that. Now, a lot of us say it. Well, a lot of us don't even say that. Some of us are too afraid to say that. But he would, you know, let's say, for example, some of us would say they would defend their family. Come hell or high water, they would defend their family. And that might be true because given certain situations, I've seen myself where moves were made on a family and that person went to others for help. You know, I'll just say for the record, I remember a situation, and I won't say what church it was, but I remember in church that there was a brother who came to the brotherhood, and I'm not going to identify the church nor the person, but this brother came to the brotherhood complaining that a young man had beat his sister up. And that person was married to the person, and for whatever reason, he beat her up. And this brother is twice that person's size, but came to the church brotherhood and asked for help. Now, I don't know about you, but that matter would have been finished before I showed up in church again. It would have been resolved real quick, one way or the other. And I don't have to, you know, get into what those measures might be. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use this phone to do that. I would have wrote out a prescription. That prescription would have been handed to that person for them to take that medicine. And whether it cures them or not is okay, because they're going to get that prescription. You know, and the brotherhood might hear about it later. You know, they might hear about it, and depending on what the prescription was, there might be a confirmation or a denial. You know, it's just that simple. But, you know, so I'm just saying, when people talk all this stuff, well, if they did that to anybody in my family, well, there's a history of people that do things for others that they're not related to. There are people that will help people who they don't even know. And those are the people we need to cherish. Sister Leola Maddox, she took in children, took them upstate to a camp. Some of those children never left New York City in their lives. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know. There are some black children who actually never left the 5 boroughs. Some never left Brooklyn their whole lives. And their parents didn't take them anywhere. So that Disney World and all that, I know some children, the furthest they ever went in their life was Bear Mountain. That's the furthest. And I know the inside of the sleepaway camp that they asked for a certain amount of money. But guess what? If you didn't have it, you still got there. Now, there were people that contributed. I always made sure 100 blacks in law enforcement would give a very significant amount that would get like 2 or 3 children up there. We used to do the thousands that we would put up for the camp, and then I would write checks, and Noel would write checks, and others would do that to make sure, I would ask Sister Leola how she was doing as far as getting enough money to bring all of these children up, because it doesn't matter what benevolence that United African Movement was doing, they still had to pay bills to the sister who ran the camp. She was going to count the amount of rooms and charge you based on that, and I'm not saying that she didn't give some breaks. I wouldn't want to say that about her, but, she charged, and, we had to come up with that money. So, Sister Leola was that kind of person, and certainly on her birthday, if no other day, we should remember her. And people know about Dr. Collins, but they don't know the good nature of some of the things that Ray talked about with her, just working 2 jobs for all those years to make up for the fact that her husband lost his livelihood in the battle for our people, Alton Maddox Jr. And she didn't dump him. She just went on with the work and worked those 2 jobs, and Alton got what he did. It was some fundraising that happened on occasions, and we would do things in UAM, but it's nothing like having a job and having that consistent money coming in. And so she sacrificed in a whole lot of ways and did so much. I used to see her in UAM literally falling asleep. And it wasn't from a lack of interest in the subject matter. It had more to do with she was just flat out tired. And her health suffered. And even Alton Maddox, his health was suffering. And I remember vividly years ago, Dr. Lewis would say, can you talk to Alton about health and nutrition, and died years ago. So he saw it. And any of us that were around saw that also. So, one thing about freedom fighters and historians like the ones that Ray talked about, not many of them are health conscious. they just grab something to eat on the run and keep moving. So if you've ever been around a lot of those that Ray mentioned, they eat on the run. You won't believe it as conscious as they are, but they would eat at McDonald's, Burger King, and any of those places like that. Fast food, they just grab something and run. Wherever they at, they just grab something to eat. And you'll see them, if you bring them in here, before they get ready to lecture, they're over there eating some fast food. Not something cooked at home, not a balanced plate. It's just some quick things on the plate. Starch and meat, very little green. You're going to see on their plates. But that's just the life they live. It's not ignorance. It's just that they know they got to be here. Then I got to go over here and I got to run. And it takes a toll. So the alert eyes of Dr. Lewis was concerned. And just want to thank him for that. Thank him for that. That's important. And it's good to have him here tonight. And we should get, if you don't have them, you should get his lectures. They're only on DVD, only because the things that he talk about, the YouTube right now won't allow it. They disallow real frank conversations about COVID and the so-called vaccine. They don't allow that. So subsequently, he suffers at this moment by not being able to get that kind of message out. So even when he's talking about world events and commerce, economics, the history of colonialization and real good subjects like that, it gets lost because of his emphasis on the reality, the condition of our people, and those that are taking certain things. You know, things that you're ingesting, the snake bite, maybe that'll fly a little easier, just saying the snake bite. You know, so I'm not going to get heavy into the stuff like Dr. Lewis do it, because I want my stuff to play. And, but it's good to have somebody who's going to give you the unvarnished truth at all times. And as Dr. Clark used to say, now I'll talk about what I was here to talk about. You know, Dr. Clark, you ever see Dr. Clark go 45 minutes or an hour and a half, then he said, oh, okay, now we're going to talk about such and such. You know, well, that was my closest thing to, you know, being a little Dr. Clark in that way. But, you know, so I want to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. tonight. And Dr. Cobble last week said something very interesting. I've heard him say it before. He said, I'm only telling you what you already know. So the things I'm going to talk about with Dr. King, with the real Dr. King, is things that you already know. Because in a few days, actually this Monday coming, so that's 5 days from now, I believe. 5 days from now, you're going to hear so much stuff. And most of it is not going to be accurate. They're not going to give you the real Dr. King. For some are good reasons, and other ones is what white people taught them to say about Dr. King. If you go to the school system, you will hear primarily in all 50 states, and I dare say probably in the Caribbean and in Africa, I have a dream. Unfortunately, you're going to hear that. You're going to hear young millionaires, NFL players, National Football League, pro football. you're going to hear a whole lot of basketball players in the next few days. And they have all these basketball games on. And every player, millionaires, is making 30, 35, 40 million a year just on the court, and they're getting another 20 in advertisements. And they're going to say the same thing that they learned in elementary school and in the kindergarten and second and third grade. They're going to say the same thing. Oh, Dr. King believed that he fought for everybody. Is that accurate? He fought for everybody? Dr. King fought white supremacy. Might have fought it his way. He might not have fought it the way that you would want him to do. But Dr. King was fighting not an invisible enemy, an enemy that was intractable, an enemy that was in our face, had his foot on our necks for the last 4 centuries. And that's who Dr. King fought. Dr. King had to, in his own way, maybe not your way. I've heard 1,001 people say, oh man, you know, if Dr. King was here now, and Malcolm was here now, and the Black Panther Party was here now, man, nobody would be following Dr. King.
That's right. All the people.
If I had the choice to do it, no, I ain't down with that turn the other cheek stuff. I'm not down with, you know, I'm going to love them. I'm going to love them if they smack me. If they spit on me, I'm going to love them. Nothing can compete with the power to love, and talk about things like that. You have to understand, Dr. King was a philosophy major. So he was different than your typical Southern preacher. Different. This is why, whether it was Gandhi or 1,001 white philosophers and theoreticians, he always quoted them. Very rarely, if ever, did he quote a black philosopher. But you need to do that because you've had the presence of Dr. Ben. You've had the presence of Dr. Carr. You've had Scobie. You've had Mackey. And I'm not being disrespectful from just calling about those names, because I you know, instead of putting doctor in front of it, because this is what they were. When you say Ben and Clark, we know who we're talking about. So I'm saying that we have the benefit. Mute the whole thing, Brad. Just mute. We've had the benefit of their information. So we should not, every time we're talking about an intelligent person, an intelligent child even, we should not say, oh, that's an up-and-coming Einstein. What does Einstein have on George Washington Carver? Would somebody tell me that? What does Einstein have on George Washington Carver? One of the greatest scientists that ever lived. But you'll never hear anybody say, well, who do you think you are, George Washington Carver? You're not going to hear that. You're not going to say, oh, that's Charles Drew. You're not going to hear that. You're going to continue to use white people as the standard. And unfortunately, he did that at that time. And even though I would say obviously Thurman and others, Dr. Thurman and others were a great influence, Dr. Mays, I'm not dismissing it, because obviously they weren't.
We can't hear Michael.
No sound, no sound.
Okay. All right, he's going to get it. Do you hear me now? How about now? How about now?
Just keep on, Mike.
So,
Yeah, we good. We good. I can hear you. We can hear you now.
okay,
Yes.
fantastic. So it's not so much that the onus is on you to quote them. I'm just saying that it's not a good look. If all you quote, you know, if you've been around Dr. Ben and you understand the brilliance of Dr. Ben, then you should say as much. If it's Dr. Leo Hansberry, we've had brilliant, look, let me tell you something. You can't get a person more brilliant than Dr. Amos Wilson. And we had him in our midst. You haven't seen a psychiatrist or a psychologist on Dr. Amos Wilson's level. Never, white or black or anywhere. You ain't seen a white Francis Cress Wilson in your life. I mean, you go to the average white campus and you see all those silly white girls giggling and participating in, well, I won't even tell you what they do. You know. I've heard about it. You know, some of the things they would do, and football players enjoy, you know, those sessions. That's all I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But, you know, look, I saw it at Boston College. You know, they would say, yo, man, there's a set over here, there's a, you know, over here, you know, and anytime you popped in the door the wrong time, you see a lot of the guys on the football team or basketball team and what have you, and say, yo, come on in. No, thank you. You know, just keep it moving. So, you know, I'm just saying that, have you ever seen a white woman that could even touch Francis Wells Wilson? Tell the truth. Now, if you're offended and you're looking on Zoom and your white girlfriend is with you, then, you know, she's going to have to handle it. She's not Francis Cress Wilson. Nothing, not even close. Not a reasonable facsimile of it. She's just garbage. Well, she's a skunk, but you know, go ahead and love her if you want to. But she's a skunk. And those are the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said all white folks are skunks. So, you know, and that includes your white girlfriend. So it is what it is. Well, you know, I understand. Man. So, why am I saying all this? Like I said before, if it wasn't for Dr. Ben, I'm not saying that whether it's Dr. James and so many others that we can name, you know, whether it's, you know, you like I just mentioned him because I was thinking of the Stolen Legacy, but you would not see the level of consciousness if it was not for people like Dr. Ben. Yes, you would see an ankh. You see an ankh here or there. You see people, after you've seen the liberation of Africa, and you've seen people like Kwame Nkrumah, the great Saji Fu, and you would see Sekou Touré and others, and you saw these proud black men in their African garb, and it became popular, but there's a level of consciousness that goes with it and a cultural pride that goes with it. But who made that, beside from continental Africans, when you see the contribution that First World made, you understand that while they were here, they were important. I can't think of anybody more important than Dr. Amos Wilson. You know, all those books, The Psychology of the Black Child, Black on Black Violence, you just like, man, you talking about brilliant. We had him in our midst. And Ray can speak to the point better than me on what, on an average day, what Dr. Wilson was eating on the run. You know? And so many others that I can name. And it's just, we were blessed to have that. We were blessed to have Dr. King. He made his own contributions in his own way. And certainly with Dr. King, that's the only non-president that has a holiday, a national holiday. Now, obviously, we have holidays. I'm saying in the black community, we have Kwanzaa. We have Black Solidarity Day. It's just how serious you want to take it. Now, I can bore you with some dates with Dr. King and tell you he was born in 1929 and all the dates, but I'm going to stay away from that because you're going to get all that in a few days. I want to talk about the real Dr. King and some of the things he did. Now, from the outset, and I've mentioned it before, but just in case you don't know, he wasn't born Martin Luther King Jr. Anybody know his name? His name when he was born with?
Go ahead.
Was it Michael something or something?
It was Michael. It was Michael. And the story behind that is his father's name was Michael. And so after he was at least 2-3 years old, you know, the story varies, but around 2 or 3, there was a Baptist convention that was being held in Berlin, Germany. And it's the Baptist World Alliance. That's what it was called. And a white group took Martin Sr., you know, commonly called Daddy King, took them to Germany. And there he was able to impress upon Daddy King that his son, now that's the middle son, you have to remember, he had an older sister, Christine, I think her name was, and a younger brother, AD. So he was the middle child. But this group, the white pastor in the group wanted him to rename his son Martin. And so for him to be a junior, then he had to now change his name to Martin Luther King Sr. So now there's a senior and a junior. And so when he was asked why was there a change, he didn't really give a good reason. It was a poor reason when you use any type of critical analysis or deductive reasoning. He said it was an oversight at birth. And that he meant to call him Martin Luther, you know, Luther being the middle name and Martin being the first name. But how did that mistake go on for years? You know, and how did, if it was a mistake, well, why did he change his name? You mean he was a grown man that had children? Now he changes his name to Martin. So it was a very, very poor rationale that he used to tell people. I guess he maybe didn't expect the questions to come that way, but he just said it was an oversight on the birth certificate, but the intention was to always name him that. But it really was the white group that took him to Germany. And at that World Alliance of Baptists, he decided, and that's where obviously the Protestant faith, you know, started from Martin Luther, obviously those that know that history. So in any event, he was named after somebody who was around 500 years prior to him, Martin Luther. So and so the young Martin grew up in what would be considered, in those standards at that time, middle class. You know, you have to remember the average black person in Georgia at that time did not have wood floors, running water, heat in their houses, things that Dr. King didn't have to experience, none of that at all, because he was middle class. His father was a preacher, and his father's father was a preacher, so they had a line preachers in their family, and Martin was expected to follow suit. Well, that wasn't really his implication, because he always felt less than. If you follow and study him, he wasn't the boisterous type. He didn't feel entitled, that sense of entitlement that you have when you're born in the middle class and you get a good education. He didn't have that sense of entitlement. If you really study him, he was actually a depressed child. He suffered with depression, and you know, it's very hard for black people to admit they need help. But he was depressed as a child and attempted suicide several times. First time when he was 12, then another time a year and a half, 2 years later, tried it again. And well, the second one, you kind of understand it a little more. The second time was he jumped out of a window. And I hope I'm not besmirching Dr. King in any way. You know, he was depressed. And he was getting beat a lot by his father, because his father was trying to turn him around. He would go and run out of the house, and he would disobey a lot. So he had to suffer beatings. And father was trying to discipline him. And so when, you know, he would go over to his grandparents' house, he wouldn't listen there either. But when the grandmother passed, she had a heart attack and passed, he blamed it on himself because he was disobedient. And so he ended up jumping out of a window trying to kill himself, because he felt he was directly responsible for her and what happened to her, but he wasn't. That's just literally a part of life, that people are going to die. And, you know, I don't know why, you know, what her physical condition was, but it had nothing to do with Dr. King. So that happened at 14. By 15 years old, he was already in Morehouse as a student. Young, gifted, very intelligent, and wanted, you know, he wanted it. Where some children don't really want it, he wanted it. He wanted it, you know, look forward to going to school, even though the people he went to school with probably were at least 3 years, 2 to 3 years older than him. He fit right in and always graduated with honors. So it wasn't long before he was on the road to really making his father proud. You know, real good, and I won't get it, you know, at that time, I'll just say this much. They were, you know, a Republican family, as a lot of black families were. Now, that shift, it happened back in, I'd say from 1932. Prior to that, literally every black person was Republican. And it took the incoming president, who was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had all sorts of programs that lifted, you know, the WPA and then a whole lot of other things, Social Security, and so many things that he did as a safety net. And so black people understood, even though the Republican Party, which was the party of Lincoln, and it was under that party that freedom was gained. Now, I did not say, and don't accuse me of saying Lincoln freed us. Don't anybody walk out here and say it.
You just said that, right?
Nobody gonna walk out here saying that, because I didn't say it. I said it was during the time under that party. We freed ourselves. Over 200,000 black men fought in a war and beat the hell out of the Confederacy and won our freedom. Black soldiers. Yes, we had some great insurgents over the years that fought during slavery time and scared the hell out of white folks. You know the famous revolts that happened on major plantations. But that did not free us. It was a great attempt, and it was the move. Now I know nobody in this room would have taken the whip. Everybody would have been a Nat Turner or a Denmark Beach. Everybody had. Nobody would have just said yes, yes. Nobody would be saying that, but
I'd have been in the house.
you know, yeah, well, you know. But in any event, it took over 200,000, maybe up to 230,000 black men that fought valiantly. You know, the 9th, 10th, 24th, 25th, these cavalries, they were just mopping the South up. Everywhere they went, they destroyed everything in sight. And once they got the permission to fight, instead of just carrying other people's food and other things, once they got the permission to fight, oh my goodness, they were something else. And not only did they win, it was decisive. It was to a point where they were being directed to go to places where nobody should come out alive. And they came out alive, and like they just want to know where next. Where we going to now? So much so that even at the culmination of the Civil War, even at the culmination, and there came a time that the word came out that slavery is over. There was one place, and I told you it before, it was one place that held out and said, we keeping all black men and women and children in bondage. And that was Texas. Said they're not giving up their slavery. Now, North Carolina, Georgia, and all the places got whipped so bad, they submitted. But the place that did not submit was the Lone Star State. It was the state that killed a young president in the first term of his presidency.
JFK.
And so, that's right, JFK. And so, when the 9th, 10th, 24th, and 25th heard there was black men, women, and children still in bondage, they said, let's go. They had a white general that was with them, but everybody was black. Now, the white Confederate generals, captains, colonels, and officers, say anybody that comes into Texas will never return home. That's what they said. When they saw that dust cloud coming, because black soldiers are going to let you know we coming. When they saw that cloud from miles away, those white guys ran, these cowards that was whipping us for centuries, raping our women, killing the biggest buck, making an example of him, raping black children, men raping little black men and women, and girls, boys and girls. They ran so fast, these cowards ran so fast that they ran from Texas into Arizona and in California. They just ran as far west as they could. Left all them slaves, enslaved Africans, and just took off. New Mexico, you name it. They just left. The majority of them went into Arizona. Some went points north, but most of them went west into Arizona. You know, the cowards that they were. So we freed ourselves. So I just said that so that nobody would say that Lincoln, I don't want anybody to leave here saying that Michael said Lincoln freed the slaves. Now I've heard Reverend Sharpton and other people refer to him as the great emancipator. You will never hear those words from me. He didn't emancipate none of us. All he did is when he saw the North losing is that he set the stage for Congress to approve of us, to get weapons and to fight. That's all he did. He did that. He did that when he was going to lose because he understood that under his administration, you're not going to lose half the country. He made a very powerful decision. I give him that. That I'll give him. That he could have did what Johnson, who preceded him, he did, just put your head in the dirt. He didn't do that. He made it clear. He said that words in scripture, a house divided cannot stand. Consequently, he started it by sending a brigade of soldiers into South Carolina, taught something, and that's what started the Civil War. So we freed ourselves. So in that spirit, and then shortly thereafter, we developed the colleges and certainly institutions and jobs, unions, credit unions, all this stuff was done in a relatively short period of time after the Civil War. So in this environment, we see a young and upcoming Martin Luther King. Now, I'm not going to veer off too far from it, but I will say that that him and his colleagues, and just want to even ask about his colleagues, because birds from a feather fly together. You know that he was an alpha in the fraternal order. You know that he was an alpha, alpha phi alpha. And they're the oldest, they're the first. And you also know, or you know, whether you have critical information to be definitive, that many of him and those around him were boule. And won't venture too far into that, but I'll just say for the record that many of them were, and you could see the boule element to this very day. Even whether it's guys like Warnock, who's the senator, the U.S. senator from Georgia, who passes Ebenezer right now. Ebenezer is his father's church. That church has been under there, you know, for quite a few generations. Daddy King, and you know, certainly Martin pastored that church. Also, you know, but you know, he made his name at Dexter in Alabama. Obviously, you know, as you all know, like Kava said, I'm only telling you things you know. So if you thought that I was going to be revelatory and tell you things that you don't know, it's not going to be too much you don't know about Dr. King. But, you know, he started out at Dexter as a pastor. And that's after Crozier, that's after Boston University, that's after Morehouse, where he was just getting degrees in theology and philosophy and all of that. That's so he was at Dexter, and obviously everybody knows the critical incident that occurred, right? What was it? While he was there, he was actually finishing up his doctoral dissertation at that time, and something happened in Montgomery. In Montgomery.
Church and church.
What's that?
For the girls.
Say that again?
For the girls.
No, that came later. That came much later. Much later. I'm talking about back in 1955.
The bus boycott?
Well, the bus boycott came later. The incident was obviously Rosa Parks. So in 55.
But it must have been 55, then it has to be, what's his boy, Emmett Till.
Well, yeah, but
Emmett Till was in 55.
Emmett Till had happened prior to what happened to Rosa Parks, and actually I'm glad you said that, because Rosa Parks said that her protest in refusing to get off of the bus and to give up her seat was because of Emmett Till. And to those, if you've never seen that picture, just trust me, that picture is as hideous today in 2022 as it was in 1955. Manito Mobley, she wanted everyone to see what they did, and even though, and she had to actually fight to get the body. I think it was Attorney Gray, who was later became a real civil rights attorney, and I'm saying that not facetiously, a real civil rights attorney, as opposed to these ambulance chases that we have now. I'm talking about real people that's going to get you out of jail, people who are going to help you, advise you in the movement. And,
Was he inspired by Gandhi?
Yeah, that's one of the philosophers that inspired Dr. King. There's no question about it.
No, when you said what happened in 55.
What happened in 55 was Rosa Parks.
Right, right.
Now, before y'all start beating me over the head, and what about Claudette Colvin and others, I'm aware, I am keenly aware of their protest and how it wasn't supported. You know, Marianne Louise, it wasn't supported for a lot of reasons, which I won't get into too much, but I don't have a problem saying that complexion played a role in it. You know, and I'm just going to be for real with you, and that when you look at Rosa Parks, straight up Fox.
Fine.
You know, if you don't understand, then you ain't looking. You know, besides being fine, she had an impeccable record. She had a husband. She was a lifelong member of the NAACP.
That's it right here.
You know, and so even black men who've been beaten down
That's it right
their whole life, they just can't sit idly when a real example of African womanhood is being treated that way. So they had to do something. It was just a question of what, but they had to do something. Well, what did they do? They had a meeting. The pastors, all these various pastors, had a meeting with some labor leaders, Edie Nixon, I think somebody had mentioned that name earlier. So you had Abernathy, and you had this new guy on the block that just became the pastor of Dexter, Martin Luther King. Now, they didn't even know him, but they knew of his father. His father was relatively known in Alabama, of course. It's right next to Georgia. So his father was known, and they knew that he was a preacher's kid. And they knew that he was, about 26, let's say. Dr. King was about 26 at that time. So the average pastor at 26 is not too much in a position to advise other people that are much older when they have marital problems and all kind of other issues that come up in the church. You might have the board members that feel that they're in a better position to discern this problem from this problem and handle that a little better than a young person that just got out of school. But Dr. King was exceptional. He had command of the language more so than the average preacher. Now, a preacher can preach, but they didn't have the command of the language like Dr. King. And also, those degrees in philosophy opened them up to thinking, looking at other issues that they might not have even entertained. Now, before I go further with Dexter and what happened with Rosa Parks, does anybody know who was the pastor of Dexter prior to Dr. King?
I was trying to think of his name.
Bad man.
They made a movie about him.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Anybody know? It was Reverend Vernon Jones.
Vernon Jones, right.
Now, you talking about a black man that was old man? That's Vernon Jones. Now, if you don't know, you need to know. And if you don't have any writing, then just put that name in your phone. Vernon Jones. You know, put that in your phone. Vernon Jones. Let me tell you something. Vernon Jones, you talking about a trooper? In the South, they were so, I don't want to say the word backward, I'll just say timid or docile, trained, what have you, that white guys, men, used to rape black women on a regular basis. 2, 3 guys driving around in the car, see a young 16, 17, 18-year-old girl walking down the block, and they just snatch her and rape her. Well, this had happened 2 or 3 times already, and then this young girl came to Reverend Jones into his office, or as they call it back then, and probably still do, their study. That's the pastor's study. And she cried like a baby and said that she was raped. She was about 15, 16. And that she was raped by several white men. And he said, who did it? She identified the guys that raped her. She was able to, and he went and took her immediately to the local precinct. And demanded that they arrest those white individuals. So the police had to take the complaint. You know, if you fill out the paperwork, they said, well, we'll see what they can do. And she said, they're so-and-so, and they live such and such. Well, the police department said, we'll see what we can do. Inside of a day or two, the parishioners in that church was telling Reverend Jones, leave that alone. They said this happened before, and you have to remember the mentality of the 40s and the early 50s. When a woman was raped, do you know what the prevailing thinking of a man was?
She deserved
It was unfortunate.
What did she do?
It was unfortunate.
You understand that? What did she do? You're not even addressing what they did. Because why would white men just rape her outright? So his parishioners and then eventually his board told him, leave it alone. This is not speculation. I'm giving you the facts, what they told Reverend Jones. Told him, leave it alone. He said, I can't do that. He said, I got daughters. And if somebody raped mine, he going right to the 4 or 5. He going right to the 45. It's not going to be nothing to talk about. So he said, no, I can't leave it alone. This girl identified the perpetrators. We got to do something. His board demanded that he leave it alone. He wouldn't leave it alone. You know what they did? They fired him. They fired him because he insisted that the perpetrators of raping a little girl be arrested. Now, he had already did some other things with the kissing case, and he did some other things already that they told him to leave it alone. He had already defended, like a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old who were like in the kindergarten with a little white girl at one time. And then they saw each other again. You understand? Like a year or so later, they were reunited where they was in the same school again. So when one of the children, the younger one or the older one, they were brothers, hugged her. And she hugged them. They hugged each other. They arrested two little children, don't even know why they arrested them. And he went to bat for them. Like, no, you don't arrest our children. And the church was silent. Now, if you think that there's something wrong with that church, that was the average black church down there. They didn't challenge white people. White people were not to be challenged. The most you can do is try to negotiate. Well, Reverend Vernon Johns wasn't doing that, and he eventually, because they didn't have many lawyers down there, he eventually had to get a lawyer, get lawyers actually from New York. Some lawyers came down there, but so I'm saying that to give you a picture of who Vernon Johns was. He was a strong man. He wasn't a coward. He was a fighter. They didn't want that, and so when he went to church that Sunday in front of a packed church, and he started laying it on them about how dare you tell me, how dare you call my wife and tell my wife to talk to me, and I'm fighting for a little girl and you trying to disrupt my family? You know, so when he got on him that bad, they fired him. So when they fired him, the search began to look for a new pastor. It took them a couple of years. They had interim people who came in temporarily. And then they ended up picking this young minister from Atlanta, Georgia. They knew he came from the middle class. They knew that his father was ultra conservative. And they knew that they just was impressed by all those degrees that this young minister had. And they felt they could mold him. They said, this is somebody that we can control. So you're not going to hear this stuff like this Monday. You ain't going to hear that. That's why the church recruited him, because they felt he could be molded. Now, how did he become the spokesperson and leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association? How did he do that? Does anybody know? It's for the reasons that we just discussed. They didn't want to challenge the white leadership in that town, the mayor. And they certainly didn't want to do with the terrorist group that they had that. And that's what the KKK and the White Citizens Council, those are terrorist groups, domestic terrorists. So it was the White Citizens Council who were the authority in Montgomery at that time. So those preachers who had a vested interest in keeping things the same way, they didn't want the job. They would have all gotten the job before a 26-year-old transplant from Georgia. They didn't want the job. So they all pointed to him and said, you do it. You have so many fine degrees. You do it. Oh, you sound so nice. We heard a couple of your sermons. Oh, you sound really good. You know, if this thing is in the newspapers and on TV, you sound really good. You know, that's what they told him. Abernathy told him later, you know that was all BS, right? He said, did you think for a second that they really think that of you? That's what Abernathy told him. He said, man, they picked you because they didn't want to do it. He said, all that years of preaching in that room, and they're going to pick the guy that just got the job as a pastor? They told him, Abernathy told him straight up, man, they don't look at you as anybody. They need a fall guy.
Oh, God.
They need a fall guy. And you're going to be the fall guy. If this thing goes sour, you're going to have to deal with the White Citizens Council, not me. Because I'm going to keep my distance. They ain't blowing up my house. That's why he became the leader. So that's why I'm going to give him credit. Because he could have said, no, sir, I'm not doing it. When they told him that, he went home, and his wife testified to it. And he just started writing. What am I going to say at this meeting tonight when we announce we are the Montgomery Improvement Association, and what am I going to say to all of those people? And he sat down and was writing things, and the way his wife described it, he's crossing out things, he's tearing paper, throwing it in the garbage can, and finally he put something on paper and he told them that we ready. Let's go. And went there and made a speech that turned the whole town out. I mean, it was a packed audience. It wasn't at his church. Dexter was too small. I think it was at Abernathy or somebody else's church that had a really, really big church, and that's where they had it. And after that, or at that meeting, he called for a boycott. I'm talking about a real civil rights leader. He called for a boycott. This was going to be the strategy. The strategy is, we're not going to ride the buses. Mm-hmm. Now, black people rode the buses so much that was income they depended on. So, this might not sound heavy to you now in 2022. We're talking about 1955. Now, this was not the first time it happened, because it happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, about close to a year prior to what Dr. King did, because that's where they got it from. Dr. King said, no, it happened, and Reverend Jefferson was successful. So they were trying it in Montgomery. They actually called for a boycott, but they didn't expect major participation. They said, well, some people stay home, at least these people in the church who stay home, and they had the flyers made out. And man, when they went out the next morning, nobody was on the bus. And they had people at bus stops and handing out things, and when the people read, no, we walking or wherever we going, they actually followed it. I mean, Dr. King and Abernathy and all were shocked. Edie Nixon, all were shocked that this is really going on. Do you know this thing went on for 13 months? It went from the end of December of 55 to somewhere in January of 57. It was about 13 months. Do you realize that? That people walked for a whole year plus? And it was so successful that they got called to the table. So now, Dr. King, Edie Nixon and others, Elaine Robinson, they're in a room sitting across from the mayor and the president of the White Citizens Council. Right there, demanding that black people get on the buses. Now, they had already organized cars. They were utilizing everybody that had a car to pick up some people on your way to work and do the same thing going back the other way. And they even bought some cars. They organized, pooled their resources, and actually pulled it off. And this is why they don't mention the Montgomery bus boycott, but they don't give you context. Because they don't boycott now. The civil rights leaders now, all are in the pockets of corporations. And they can't tell you to boycott. And so, I got you. Let me just, before the break, let me just say this, that Montgomery bus boycott was so successful to get people that are used to taking the whip, used to being disrespected. Alton Maddox grew up in Georgia, and he talked about cases where he saw a white man walk into a black man's house, and the black man had to stand outside the door until he was finished. Now, I'm telling you what you already know, because you know what? None of y'all asked me, well, what was he standing outside for? None of y'all asked. You know what went on in there. Can you imagine that?
No.
Growing up in that environment? Now, some of us would just say, we got to lose our life, because his head is going to be removed from his body for what he did to mine. But this is the environment. You used to be a whip, so instead of one lash, you get two. Instead of two, you get four. It's going to be some 16-year-old girls, 14-year-old girls that's going to be victimized by a white man. This is the system he was dealing with. So, Dr. King, you can't ask them to pick up a gun or pick up a baseball bat or a knife. It's hard enough to get them just to stand up and walk by people and not walk on the sidewalk. You got to remember, black people at that time was walking off the sidewalk into the dirt. You understand? We're talking about the deep south. So if there's a sidewalk, you were not allowed to share that sidewalk with a white family that's walking by. You was expected to walk into the dirt, let that entire white family walk by, and then you can get back on the sidewalk. All right? You could not even dress in nice clothes at that time. In the South, they had sumptuary laws. Y'all know what sumptuary laws are? In other words, black people at that time, if you were not a teacher, if you were not a doctor like Dr. Lewis, if you were not, I'm trying to think of the term, mortician for, funeral parlor, you could not wear a suit during the week.
Or tie.
A suit and a tie, correct. You could not wear that during the week. You could wear that on a Sunday. But walking around like you a big shot on a Tuesday or Wednesday with a suit on, somebody's going to say, boy, what are you doing with that on? Take that off. So that's the environment. Am I giving you a sort of a picture that Dr. King had to deal with? So it was monumental. I'm saying all this to say it was monumental to get people to boycott. And you had the terror factor. The White Citizens Council, now obviously the KKK was bigger, but in Montgomery, the power was the White Citizens Council. So that's what he had to deal with, and they sat right across the table with the mayor. And Dr. King had the courage to say, we are offended to be in this room, and we're sitting in the same room with the president of the White Citizens Council. He said that. Straight up. He didn't act like they wasn't there, like there's no elephant in the room, and I'm just going to keep my head down and listen to the mayor talk. He said, man, why are they here? That's Dr. King. You ain't going to hear that Monday. I'm telling you, he was a man now. You might not agree with everything that he did, but I'm letting you know he was nobody's punk. He was not a punk. But I'll stop right there, Ray, because I know you've been signaling me for a while. So we'll stop.
Okay, you can mute yourself, Zoom audience. We're going to have a little 5-minute break, then Brother Mike is going to come back. We got some soup and some croissants right there. I'm going to do a little collection.
Still got questions, just ask. Ray, you got one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we're gonna bring Mike back. Thank you, Zoom audience. Thank you if you enjoyed the refreshments, the soup. Listen, you can look at all of Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s lectures on YouTube, Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. on Rumble. You can get Doc's video that they didn't put on YouTube. And you can YouTube Community Cop, and all the programs will come up. And don't forget this Saturday at 12 o'clock, State of the City with our brother Darren Muhammad on TuneIn Radio and on Facebook Live. That's this Saturday. And don't forget Sister Filet, 10:30 on Saturdays. And the hottest show on the East Coast, Thorough Black Talk with Keisha, Tad, and Ashe. That's tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much. We're going to bring Brother Mike back and give him a big hand.
Okay, you started?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm trying to think of what I was ending with.
They was having a meeting with the White Citizens Council.
Yeah, they met with the White Citizens Council as well as the mayor's office, and they tried to stop the boycott, but the boycott continued. They even had a preacher that told them the boycott was over, and that because his assignment was to go to their meeting and convince them and talk them out of the boycott. And some people were willing to stop the boycott, but the people wanted it to continue. So it continued, but they thought that it was over, but it really wasn't over. So in any event, the time did come where white people acquiesced. And this is the average person who rode the bus. They had to acquiesce, and so the leadership made it that if you pay your fare, you can basically sit wherever you wanted to. Now that was a good thing. That was a victory that it was noteworthy. To make that happen, it was noteworthy. Now, when this happened in 57, you would think that that everything will go back to normal. By then, they actually went from that association, the Montgomery, which they kept in place, and then after that, Dr. King was now feeling his oaths as a leader. Do you know, and they won't tell you this, Monday, Dr. King went to Ghana.
Yeah.
Dr. King, after that victory in 57, he was aware enough to understand what the mantle of leadership was. So when the great Asajifu, Kwame Nkrumah, was celebrating their independence, Dr. King went to Ghana. Now, obviously, it was others who went. You had, I think it was Carl Rowan, another Uncle Tom sellouts that was there reporting it, because he was on assignment reporting back to like FBI, CIA and all that. But you had Congressman Powell, Adam Clayton Powell, went to Ghana. Now the State Department was against Powell going, because he was the preeminent leader of Black America. He wasn't just Harlem's congressperson, he was the congressperson for all of Black America. So they had problems in, actually they told Adam not to go, because they know, his thing is Black power. So they didn't want him to go there and start telling Ghana that your problems are our problems are your problems. They didn't want that. But he went. And they were all surprised to see that young minister from Georgia there in Ghana. Because this is black people celebrating black independence. I mean, they're not going to talk about that Monday. That Dr. King was aware enough to go where the continent of Africa is waking up. And in waking up, you got to join them. You got to be with them and stand with them. They just took over Ghana, where you know that after that, a whole lot of other African countries followed suit. Right after that, in 57 and 58, it just was a landslide of the yoke of colonialism, at least to a certain extent, was being removed. So he was there, and that's big time for Dr. King to be there. That won't be mentioned in all these documentaries and things you'll see on Dr. King. Now, as he grew, and you know that, and I'm trying to move fast so I have time for Q&A, he eventually, in desegregating the South, you have to remember, there were white people, it was in their interest to allow some desegregation and some integration to occur. You have to remember that all leaders are not made, some of them are handpicked.
Right.
And white people understood that if you keep everything black in the black community, you know, at one time, and I gotta give you some examples, because I want y'all to picture this with me. I don't want to be talking to myself. I need you to picture the way it was in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, in the South. The person who took your junior high school pictures and your high school pictures was who?
Black guy.
Black person.
Right.
You know, those small little municipal credit unions were what?
Black.
Black. The cleaners was what?
Black. Mom post store.
The mom and pop stores was what?
Black.
Also back then they had black baseball.
The clubs.
They had black baseball clubs, the Negro Leagues. White folks said, man, you know, we losing a lot of money. A lot of money. This has to change.
Right.
So it was in their interest to see Dr. King successful. Now, he wasn't successful years later in Chicago. But I don't want you to get the impression that Dr. King was a ramrod and he was just bulldozing. No. It was white people that understood his time and wanted the white people who felt entitled, no, you got to give them something.
Mm-hmm.
The elite class, it ain't going to bother them at all because they're elite. But guess what? The people that ride buses, you're going to have to tolerate sitting next to that person because it's affecting our money. So, for business, Dr. King was allowed to be the point man in that regard for Black America because we had a point man here in New York that they couldn't deal with. It was giving them problems. What's his name?
Malcolm X.
No, I'm talking about the 50s.
Adam.
Malcolm was there. It was Adam Clayton Powell. Adam Clayton Powell was giving them fits. Now, they don't tell you his true stuff. Ray never would have been a bus driver. And you wouldn't have had doctors like Dr. Lewis if it wasn't for Adam Clayton Powell. You wouldn't have had black law enforcement if it wasn't for Adam Clayton Powell. All these civil service jobs that you see, we should all acknowledge Adam Clayton Powell. Adam Clayton Powell forced his way into the city council. Back then, the city council ain't like it is now that you run in your area. Do you know the city council back then, in the late 30s and early 40s, you had to run citywide to represent your district? And so the way they had it called, you couldn't have black city council people. Because they carved it up the way your vote means nothing. There's stacking and there's packing. And just to use some political terminology, you can stack it where your vote means nothing, or you can pack it where your vote literally means nothing because it's carved. And white people can outvote you. So the few black people that voted anyway, you can't get anywhere because of the way the political system is organized. It's schemed in a way that they stay in power. So Powell had to force his way in, and he had to go to thugs, these Irish thugs that ran the city. He had to go to them and tell them straight up that, look, we're not having a white person represent Harlem anymore. He said, Daddy, I'm representing Harlem. And they said, well, we can't do nothing. You can do something. And you're going to do it. You're going to put me on and run me citywide. It's that or it's going to be war. They should have never allowed Adam to do that, because once he was city councilman, that's when he lost his mind. And got in that city council. After that, he wanted the congressional seat that they knew that they was going to have to concede. He knew that. And so he was able to get that spot. Now he was the third since the Reconstruction to be a congressman, and the other two was obviously from Chicago, and so Adam got in, and so we had a firebrand leader here in New York that was representing Black America, and it was a welcome sight to have Dr. King, from their vantage point, to have an alternative to look to, as opposed to now, to the person who mentioned Malcolm. Malcolm came about later. Malcolm was in jail until 52.
Right.
And then he didn't even have his feet ready yet to be the leader for the nation. So that came a little later.
Right.
When he rose up the ranks, and he was first in Detroit, and then later on he was the minister in Boston. Then he started going around building mosques all over America, and then he got the top spot as the national spokesperson, and his headquarters right here, mosque number 7. It was on 116th Street at that time. It's on 127th Street now, but it was on 116th Street at that time. And so Malcolm wasn't what he was to become at that time in 55. So the man was Adam Clayton Powell. And so they needed an offset. And they needed to bring the South on board because they were losing money. And black people who always made the rings, the high school rings, did the photography, the barber shops that was all black, that whole economy. They wanted a piece of that action. And they eventually did get it because integration hurt us more than it helped. And I say that without being critical of the civil rights movement, but it hurt more than it helped. So in any event, Dr. King did go to Africa. Dr. King did so many wonderful things that he did come up for the Nobel Peace Prize and won it in 64, and that was by that time J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, was incensed and threatened him. And this is, I'm trying just to mention things that you won't hear Monday. He was threatened that he better not accept it because you reserve the right to say, no, I don't want it, when you are nominated for it. And Dr. King did not remove his name as a nominee. And so he threatened him and told him that he better commit suicide, kill yourself, or I'm going to come forward with some revealing information. Now, why did he feel that he had some play in telling him to kill himself? Well, it's easy. That one is easy. It's because Dr. King had a history of it. If you have a history of attempted suicides, then it's already in your history. He had a dossier on it. He was well investigated, and he knew, I could push this guy over the edge. But what they didn't understand about Dr. King, even though as a young person, he suffered from depression, he suffered from, I'm not worthy of all these things they're putting in front of me. He's still growing, and he's developing. So that guy you investigated years ago is growing. He ain't the same guy anymore. He's answered the call enough times that now he can actually get in the ring and thump. So when Hoover told him, I'm gonna send your wife audio of you with other women.
Yeah.
Said, now you better turn down that Nobel Peace Prize, or your wife is going to hear you enjoying other women. And they had those, tapes. So Dr. King, to his credit, said, send it. And they did.
Sure they do.
They sent it to Coretta. Well, yeah, but okay, since I didn't say this, I'll repeat what somebody else said. Somebody else in the room who will be unnamed said, she already knew. I didn't say that. Michael didn't say that.
Yeah.
So he said, send it. Because he was who he was, and I'm not gonna knock him for that. A man is a man, and those things happen. And if anybody's critical of him, there's 1,001 preachers that did worse.
Right.
And so, and I'm not fond of Abernathy, who confirmed all this stuff later.
Yeah.
So for Abernathy to sell a book and to put in the book that he had extramarital affairs in all the major cities, he had a little something waiting for him when he would go to these various locations. Abernathy, you shouldn't have said that. There's no amount of money to castigate your leader, your friend. So you didn't get that I didn't see anything documented from Hosea Williams. I didn't see it documented by Jesse. I didn't see it documented by Andrew Young. I didn't hear Wyatt T. Walker said that. That came from his best friends and confidant to sell a damn book. I mean, that's your 30 pieces of silver. For that, you're gonna kill him again from the grave? So, Abernathy did that. So in any event, that's stuff by, and that's not unusual for the FBI to exploit existing weaknesses. If they feel that you have a weakness where you will literally kill yourself because you're overwhelmed by a certain condition, they will make you do that. But it didn't work with him. And that shows what kind of character that Dr. King had. And I'm trying to mention things because you're going to get all messed up in a few days. So Dr. King did that. Now, regardless of what you think of Dr. King, it was others in his camp. Wyatt T. Walker was a chief strategist. And you had various people, and birds of a feather flock together. When the SCLC was formed, you had various people who've all done good since then. Now, I just want to say one thing quickly about civil rights. At that time, a civil rights leader was taking his life into his own hands by being a leader. See, now it's easy. You can run for office now, you can form an organization on a virtual computer, online and all this stuff. And now you got an organization, now you got people, and you can do anything. Well, back then, the KKK, White Citizens Council, and other groups would step to you. And if the corporations don't buy you, then those guys are gonna do what they do. Well, I'm gonna name some people. As a matter of fact, did I scribble their names? Yeah, I scribbled some names down. And I'm just gonna go by your response. So I'm not talking about Barry Rustin and Y.T. Walker, who's passed. Is Andrew Young a millionaire?
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Young. Is Jesse Jackson a millionaire?
Yeah.
I'll just mention those two. I got some other names, but some of them have passed now. I'll leave well enough alone. Now, what about Reverend Sharpton? Is he a millionaire?
Yeah. Clinton camp.
How much?
The Clinton camp, right?
Okay, so we got civil rights leaders that are millionaires. Did Dr. King have a lot of money?
No.
When he passed, he was almost broke. Some has estimated that between $5,000 and $6,000 he had, and that had to deal with a mortgage, a family, a wife and children, his traveling all over, and all the things that he was doing. So he didn't have much money. Now, when
insurance?
What's that? That's Belafonte that did that.
Paid insurance.
Belafonte took care of the insurance. And you mentioned that Belafonte, his name is right here. But I just didn't want to call because Belafonte, whatever money he made it as an entertainer, as an actor, singer, and all those things that he did. So I wouldn't include him with all these other names that I have here because he made money and gave money. Sidney Poitier, who just passed, gave money to Dr. King also. So they made a contribution. And so you don't have to be too hard on them for their white wives. You know, those two in particular. But they did have them. And so you can still keep your so-called black card by saying you gave money to Dr. King. But now, a part of the question that I would ask you before we start the Q&A is, who would have thought that you could become a millionaire as a civil rights leader? Not having your own cleaners business like George Jefferson, by actually civil rights. So Jesse, I'm sure he's well over the $10 million mark, and that's a conservative number. Sharpton and others, they have become civil rights leaders, ambulance chasers. They have lawyers in place that's all part of a cabal that they put together where the lawyers get the money and do a kickback to them. They are being fed from the trough of corporate America, takes care of them and makes sure they are millionaires. As a matter of fact, it was so bad that Sharpton owed over $2 million in back taxes that he didn't pay. So what was he making to owe $2 million to the government? And why did Bloomberg take care of it? What vested interest does Bloomberg have that he would take care of a debt like that? Well, Bloomberg came into the mayor's, I think at that time, and don't hold me exactly, but he had between $4 and $5 billion. When he left 12 years later, he was well organized. It took your whole life, 60-something years, to reach 4 to 5 million. I mean, billion with a B. Then how do you, while you're a mayor and all your money is allegedly in blind trust, how do you accumulate well over $30 billion over those next 12 years? So in any event, the civil rights movement in many instances became the civil rights business. So that's why now you see Sharpton in a $2 million condominium in Manhattan, in Midtown. You know, and you see Jesse, he has one of the biggest buildings, the Push Rainbow building in Chicago, and they are all secure. Their futures are secure. As civil rights leaders, they are steadfast at what they do, and they're not going to be removed. Nobody's going to take Jesse out as the Rainbow Push leader. Nobody's going to remove Sharpton from the National Action Network, which is a front. It's just a front for the Madison Avenue Initiative. It's a front. That's where he gets his money from. Being in control of the black community, all the advertisement dollars. So anybody that's on radio, he can take them out if he wants to. Jesse, the Wall Street Project, so he can put people on boards of corporate America, the Fortune 500 companies. He pick up a phone, you on a board of Citibank, Citicorp, or anywhere else, just with a phone call from Jesse. And that's the way he's always had it. And Reverend Sharpton took a page out of that and formed the, the Madison Avenue Initiative. So these are corporate leaders. So I'm just doing that to juxtapose the difference of a situation where you're fighting for your life, your family is being bombed while you were at a demonstration like what happened with Dr. King. He had to rush home to make sure that his children were okay after his house being firebombed. Reverend Shuttlesworth, his house was firebombed and brought to the ground. And so this is a whole new era. Now they do fake arrests. When you're arrested now by the police department, they put you in a nice truck, a van, take you to the precinct, you get your Wendy's hamburger or Burger King, whatever you prefer, Big Mac, what have you. You get a nice little check from that municipality, the mayor, the governor. You get you a check. You catch a first class flight back to New York. And that's the way things are set up now. And it's just a sham. They're not leaders. They're in the civil rights business, or as some call it, the civil rights business. Silver, as in 30 pieces of silver. So in any event, that's a big difference, and I would not ever want you to connect Dr. King with any of it. You know, Jesse was able to run for president in 84, 88. Andrew Young became a mayor of Atlanta, of course, and later became an ambassador. And everybody's got something, everybody's fat, you know, got the bag. And that's the legacy that they all got from being around Dr. King. And so even a guy like Sharpton connects his organization in the tradition, so-called, of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They will all have big festivities in a few days. And the real character of a man like Dr. King will go unnoticed, and they'll give you the obvious, the milquetoast stuff. You know, I have a dream, and little black boys, and you know, white boys, and girls will all walk down together and all that stuff. So you know, you're going to get that in a few days, but I wanted to give you sort of a different picture, form a different image of what he was, and irrespective of the Christianity that some might have a problem with, irrespective of whether he was boule or not, you know, irrespective of him sitting down behind closed doors with people. Look, Reverend Oliver, one quick story, we go right to the Q&A. Reverend Oliver told me out of his own mouth that their struggle in Birmingham, Dr. King came through. They were in Birmingham, Alabama, which they called Birmingham. And they were in a boycott. They were boycotting downtown Birmingham. The white power structure contacted Dr. King and told him to come in to break up their boycott. And much to the chagrin, I have to tell you, Dr. King tried to break up their boycott.
Wow.
Now, I don't know what the character they held in front of Dr. King, I don't know. But I got it from Reverend Oliver that here, his life is on the line, Dr. Shuttlesworth's life is on the line, and Dr. King told them, look, man, y'all got to break this boycott. And you know what they had to tell Dr. King, truth be told?
No.
They said, if you try to break up our boycott when we supported yours a dozen years ago, if you try to break up ours, if you succeed in breaking ours up, we're going to tell everybody what y'all did. You and Abernathy can't come in here and break up our thing. Said my house, Shuttlesworth told him, my house was bombed. And you got the nerve after all these things, all these killings that went down, and you gonna break up our boycott? Your name gonna be mud. And Dr. King had to go back to him and tell him the boycott is still on. Because all those years he put in, he wasn't gonna lose it. Once he found out that that spirit of resistance was in there, he had to acquiesce to what Shuttlesworth and Reverend Oliver and them were doing. And that's the truth. The same way the Negroes got run out of Ferguson. These current leaders that are in now, civil rights leaders, got ran out of Ferguson, got ran out of Baltimore. Same thing happened back in the day when Dr. King made the mistake of telling the white people that, okay, we'll stop it, but you have to do X, Y, and Z, as opposed to making them come to terms first, and then you stop it. But I'll stop right there because I ain't even got to my notes and so much other stuff, but I just wanted to deal with what you won't be seeing or hearing or won't be discussed in the next few days. But I'll open it up at this time to Q&A, whether it's Zoom or whether it's here. Let's go.
Can you give us a little, James Bevel, he used to come to the UAM.
Oh, bad boy.
James Bevel.
That James Bevel was one of the people that straight up would tell you that Jesse was a fraud. He was the last person that what would you call it? The baptism when you were ordained. Oh, Dr. King ran his ordination service. That's the best way to put it. For Reverend Bevel. And out of all those around him, Reverend Bevel told it like it was and raised questions at the slave theater about Jesse being a government agent. And he raised questions that have never been resolved about the assassination itself. Because as you well know, Jesse wore a t-shirt for the next few days with blood on it. Now, I don't know if it was Dr. King's blood, but when all of them were in mourning and they were having meetings, Jesse was running around blood on a t-shirt having rallies. And he never has, to this day, has had the answer for that. Because when they all went home that night, Jesse went to a rally with a blood-stained t-shirt on. So the people took it as if you see Jesse Jackson with blood on, you think he was holding Doc until the ambulance got there. But that wasn't even the case.
You said it was chicken blood.
Yeah, well, I've heard stories like that it might have been chicken blood or cow blood or something out of blood because he was not coddling Dr. King until EMS got there. That's not the case, but he's never answered that. But in any event, Reverend Bevel was one of the people that shot straight and let us know things like that. He shot straight at the slave theater, United African Movement. He shot straight and told us that. And he was ordained by Dr. King himself and shot straight. And white folks years later, trumped up some charges on him to do him. But, that's to be expected when you take certain positions.
Zoom audience, anybody got a question?
Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, Doc.
I just want to extend my appreciation for you tying and connecting these men together. It helped me a lot. And to see the connection instead of isolation.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to say is, sometimes you go and do something, and then you're caught in a situation where you realize that that's a dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes you say, look, I just got to go through it.
That's
so
right.
when you say, King and others had to understand at some point the level at which they were dealing with when he spoke against the war. And you know you're in mortal danger, but you just have that integrity or whatever it is to keep going where others drop out. And thank goodness for people like King and the rest of them. That's what I say, only because Dr. Ben gave a group of us an assignment, a group of brothers, international assignment to do certain things. So I can't speak about it beyond that.
Right.
And one of my assignments, twice, we were in the position. Had we known where we were going, we may not have done it. But once when you're there, like King and the rest of them, they see the situation, you say, look, I got to do it.
Well, I agree with you because Dr. King, and that's a good point, Dr. King was on an escalator that never returned him to the point of his entrance. He never saw it coming. And that's something I can say rather definitively and concretely about Dr. King. Dr. King did not fight for the mantle of leadership. It was thrust upon him. Every level he went to, it was thrust upon him. He never looked at it as he's the leader and everybody else is peons. Never. As a matter of fact, when you talk about his position against the war in Vietnam, he didn't have that position at one time. At one time, he wouldn't speak about that because he got the Civil Rights Act 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. How is he now going to turn on President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who signed those? His colleagues said, Martin, you can't do that. You cannot speak out against the president that did all these things for black people. But Kwame Ture said that he told Dr. King, you cannot remain silent. Now here you got his colleagues telling him, leave that alone. Leave it alone. They were telling him, leave that alone, Martin. This man has done too much. We can't bite the hand that fed us. Kwame Ture said, and Stokely Carmichael, in case anybody doesn't recognize that name, Kwame Ture. He said the strength of Dr. King was that he stayed up all night with Dr. King, telling him, brother, he said, you talked about violence, you talked about integration. He said, he told him that the greatest purveyor of violence was America. The militarism and exploitation. And Dr. King actually came out and said that. At that point of maturity and growth and development. He said that America is number one when it comes to militarism and exploitation and imperialism. So he said, questioned and said, are we investing into a burning building? Because he understood that I can't, as a minister, condone what I'm condoning when I see it's wrong. In other words, he got to where, as I said, Vernon John was. No, I can't watch a 15-year-old girl cry in my office and then not help her. I'm not built that way. So Dr. King did the same thing. And said, I know he signed that. I know we're looking for the Fair Housing Act to come along so he can sign that too. But no, God say something. I can't allow all these black soldiers to go to Vietnam and fight and come back and don't have anything for them, as the same thing that happened in World War I, World War II, the Korean War. All these vets come back, the white vets that come back, all moved to Levittown, the ones in New York, all white, got restrictive covenants that only white people can live there. They use their GI Bill and move out of the city and all move into Levittown, and all those black soldiers that fought in that same war now can't go out there. They're in rat and rodent infested houses in Harlem, you know, those row houses, tenement buildings and stuff. But the other soldiers, now they're living in a life of luxury and paying less in their mortgage, and the black soldiers are paying more in rent and have nothing to show for it. Dr. King said he had to speak out against that, and to his everlasting credit, he did. It cost him his life, but he did.
Let me just make one other point about King and the rest of them. You are rational and you weigh certain rationalities, and you know what you're dealing with. What's on the table is your life, your physical life.
Right.
But sometimes you reach a point where you say, if my family can be protected, you reach a point where you make a decision, willfully or not, where you can't go back. You say, I just gotta go. It's your mortality.
That's right.
We all want to die. Nobody wants to die, but sometimes you get in a position where you have no choice.
Right. And what Doc is saying, what Dr. Lewis is saying is so important, because Dr. King, his whole life, he did have choices. He did not have to get down in the civil rights movement. He could have very easily become the president of a major black university or dean of a college and had the life of luxury as a pastor of a big church, well established. He could have wrote books, been the president of a university, did speeches, and made money after what he did in Montgomery. He was set for life. He was, as you would say, a made man. Didn't have to involve himself in this grimy stuff. He was pulled in inexorably into something that he couldn't get off that train. And yet, he still harbored feelings of being inadequate. So he never had the arrogance of, you know, like a guy like Jesse. You know, he didn't have that arrogance about him. He was so down to earth, and all those lieutenants, whether it was Wyatt Walker and so many others, they understood that this was a gift. To have somebody like that around that wasn't arrogant, that was down to earth. I mean, the civil rights lawyers that's out there now, they would never sit down with you. For what? Just their discipline as a lawyer prevents them from walking into a barbershop, sitting down and talking to you. He's going to schedule his appointment, walk in there, get his hair cut and leave. He's not going to sit down and kick it with you. Lawyers and doctors don't do that. Dr. Lewis should be commended. He's sitting here with us, whether we got a degree or not, whether we're educated or not. Sitting down there with us, ride with us, eat with us. That's exceptional, but y'all don't recognize that. Y'all don't understand that Dr. Lewis, his profession prevents him. The people in this profession would never be caught dead here at Mackey's. There's no lawyers in the room right now. Only one doctor. That's not what they do. So I understand every time I see Dr. Lewis. I understand what I'm looking at. I understand when Dr. Jeffries comes in the room with all those degrees. I understand what I'm looking at. Now he comes to that room a little late, but he comes. So I understand that. So you know, I'm just saying that he was, and I'm just agreeing with what Dr. Lewis said, that Dr. King was pulled into something that he was not prepared for, but he grew in that process. He grew and developed and became, you know, sort of like what you would see in a mountain, in his own way. So you know, he has a great legacy that we can look at, but that's not the things that they're going to bring up a few days from now. The Zoom audience, go right ahead.
Anybody from the Zoom got a question? Anybody from the Zoom got a question? Unmute yourself, ask Mike.
Yes.
Let's go.
You gave a little bit of information about Dr. King and his father in that relationship. Can you give us a little bit more information on what happened with Dr. King's mother?
You mean the killing?
Yes.
I'll go with what I read, and I'll just say that they say that the person was mentally disturbed that came into the church and shot her. I think she was playing the piano at the time and singing. So I don't know. I can't say that this person was on assignment because I don't know. Now, I know that some people will say that that was an assigned hit on the King family, but I don't know. I really don't know, but they say the person was emotionally disturbed. But that's what they say about the lady right here at home in 1958 that stabbed Dr. King, where he almost died in 1958, just coming off of what he did in Montgomery. So I don't know about that one either, but they say the person was mentally disturbed. I hope in some way I'm answering your question.
You are. Thank you.
All right.
They also said that there was a list of 10 people on it.
There was a what?
They said that he had a list with the names of 10 different people on it he was intending to kill.
Okay.
In that time I lived in Atlanta. It happened in 74, if I'm not mistaken.
In
I
74?
think it was in 74. I was in 10th grade, going 11th grade.
So, and somebody said that there was a list.
The paper, I think in the paper they said he had a list of 10 different names on it, of different people he was supposed to kill.
This was the one who
killed the wife.
Who killed the mother?
Who killed the mother. He killed her in church.
Oh, yeah, right. She was on the piano, organ. Oh, okay, Keisha, we have a person here at Mackey's that's saying that he had a list which lends itself, that sounds like government to me. When you know, he had a list of 10 people that he planned on killing. So he was either mentally disturbed or he was on assignment, but they're saying that he had a list of 10, because I've heard that also.
You said the same thing about the Maryland
Wow,
assassin.
thank you. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
You said the same thing about the guy, the Maryland assassin. Remember the guy in the van?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said he had a list.
Okay.
They said he killed that lady with FBI who was investigating 9/11. They said she was one of the people.
Okay. Yeah, so that,
Yeah.
so, you know, he just did a juxtaposition with, they saying that the Maryland sniper also had a list of names. Next question. Or from in here. Yes, sister.
Okay, you said that there's a problem with getting on YouTube with what you had to say. But what about more progressive so-called stations like WBAI or NPR?
Okay, well, I'll say that, you know, obviously there are those among us that do consider WBAI progressive. And I'll walk with you down that road to say, well, if you give it proper context, to me, this is just me, they're not progressive because they would never allow, what host would allow Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad to express his ideas on it? He was not on BAI. Dr. Clark became a hit on BAI because they were selling his tapes and making money. He was fundraising. When he was around, they wasn't on BAI. They were on LIB or RL. They wasn't really making any inroads on BAI then. Dr. Ben wasn't either, and so many others. And truth be told, besides Utrice, no one on BAI would have Attorney Alton Maddox on. So they have their, to this day, they have their list of acceptable black leaders. When they talk about black intellectuals, they didn't have Amos Wilson on back then, no. But they have a list now. When Gary Noel invites those guys, they invite all these various white guys. Their names escape me right now, but Zen used to be one. The other guy, Chris Hedges.
Yeah.
These are the guys they consider intellectuals. They don't invite black intellectuals on because if Amos Wilson wasn't an intellectual, there's no such thing. If he wasn't, if Francis Cress Welsing wasn't an intellectual, there's no such thing as an intellectual then. And of course, Alton Maddox, our attorney at war, was not invited on it, with the exception of, at that time, Utrice Lee.
And Alambe would bring them on every once in a while.
So I don't believe, even, you know, full respect to your question, I don't believe that BAI is as progressive as it pretends to be, but when it comes to fundraising, they know that black people will write a check. So they do a lot of fundraising. They're doing black history. And white people that never heard this stuff, it blows their mind when they hear Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben, because Dr. Ben gave us the now. It was gone. They had white actors playing Samson, playing Egyptians, and all that stuff. So it was Dr. Ben, and I'm not dismissing in any way Leo Hansberry and so many other, Jonathan Jackson and others that said it was built by our people. I'm just saying the one that broke through and got to the average black person all over the country, it was Dr. Ben and Clark, more than those who had preceded them. Now, I don't know that's because of television, radio, you know, and they hit the circuit. and they were lecturing all over, going to black colleges, but the word eventually got out. So if I had to pick one person, even though I would say that the first and foremost would be Hansberry among others, I'd say Dr. Bennett gave us the Nile Valley, and all that includes, Dr. Bennett.
This
I
may,
understand what you were saying in the past, but they seem like.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but right now, what progressive voices?
No, I said supposedly.
Supposedly, yes.
And the other thing is, there are people on there that I have never heard before, and I was surprised that they're on there saying what they do, like the refuse fascism, right? And they're on there.
Who?
Revolutionary Communist Party, right?
Okay.
And they're on there on a regular basis now, and this is the first time I've ever heard that, period. And also with Dr. Nobel talking about the COVID and taking a stand against the vaccine and what have you. So that's something that is not also accepted. But
Okay, but that's medical. I'm just saying when just the whole concept of progressive, I just don't believe that they are progressive. And when they talk about intellectuals, their scope of intellectuals is white.
That's right.
You know, there's nobody more intelligent from their vantage point than Chris Hedges.
That's right.
And he can't tie Amos' shoes. Can't. They have, what's his name? What's the brother from Texas, that bad boy? They have him on.
Doctor.
The historian. What?
You mean the lawyer who writes? I forgot his name.
No, not the lawyer. He's an historian. He teaches at Houston, University of Houston, one of them.
Guy with the cowboy hat was talking about Bush all the time.
No,
Dr. Gerald
Horn.
Gerald Horn, that's right.
Dr. Horn. They have him on.
Yeah, but he's a little.
But the thing is, he's more along the lines of talking about history. He's more that. But so if you need a black face, Horn will satisfy that part.
Right.
But
Cornell West.
or Cornell West. But the Dr. Collins types, Spokesperson, no, they're not having them on the program.
On WBAI, the times that I was with Doc, they never called for him to talk. Now, Long they may have had.
They sell his tapes now.
They sell the tapes. Dr. Joseph Ben Yaakman, for the time that I was with him, 20 plus years, WBAI never asked him to come, except if it was a Long. The other thing is, which you can check me on this, WBAI with Amy Goodman.
You gotta speak to it that way, Doc. So
WBAI with Amy Goodman and others took a stand for Libya to be destroyed.
yes. And Amy Goodman is supposed to be so
For
progressive.
Libya
She's a Zionist.
and out there.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
But not against you, but they never took a stand against you.
You can't have your own thing. You on the radio representing the station. You take a position with the U.S. government for Libya to be destroyed, not Israel someplace else.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying she has democracy now by herself, right? But what I'm saying, I thought that.
What was the springboard though?
I was hoping that it would get to a point where everything could be expressed coming from whomever, because they were at that point now.
May I ask a question? I want to ask a question for clarification. You have somebody like Amy taking a position with the U.S. government to bomb Libya. Why? And there's another guy in Britain, Galloway. And I've always asked the question, what is it that Galloway, who comes from Britain, and Amy Goodman, why did they want Libya to be destroyed?
But
African country.
You're making a point that I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about.
Go ahead, then what's your question? Go ahead.
I really feel that broader, audience. People need to hear this.
I know,
People need to
but guess
know.
what?
So
No, you're right.
and
You're
that's-
right.
that's the point I'm
But
making.
here's what. If you go mainstream in your views and water down the product, you will reach a wider audience.
And I'm not
They
saying
do not, BAI, for the record, does not in any way support nationalist Pan-Africanists. And Dr. Clark said it better than anybody when he said Pan-Africanism or perish. That part, BAI does not agree with. They do not believe in Pan-Africanism, and certainly they are among them pro-Zionists.
Let me ask you one question for the audience. If you get on the radio and you agree with the U.S. government to destroy, listen to what I'm saying in the question, to destroy an African country, what makes you think that that person on the radio cares about black people any place?
Brother, doctor, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to see if there is an avenue.
There isn't.
That's out
That's what
there.
he's trying to say.
And
There isn't.
I understand what you're saying, but is there, I'm trying to see,
She's
is
looking for a
there
platform.
a platform where I'm saying we need to get more of this out there.
I agree. If that's your, if that's, I agree.
Those are not-
I think we all agree with that.
And I pose it as a question.
Yes, and I would just say
And I'm
that
not defending,
we
I'm
need,
not defending.
I know you're not, I know you're not, I know you're
But
not.
I don't like to feel like I'm being attacked because I'm bringing this up.
No, no one is attacking you, and certainly Dr. Lewis is not
What we're saying
attacking you.
is that is not a vehicle for African people. That station and
and
almost
that's
every
all
other
that's
station
said.
like it, they're all against African people here and abroad. These people are not
So-
friendly to African
and so-
people.
Okay, so in other words, the prevailing thinking is that BAI won't be that forum, but you said we need
Yes.
forums, we
And
need
we
to get the
deserve-
message out.
we deserve
So,
to have an outlet.
and I guess so what people are saying is that we need that, but it won't be from BAI.
Yeah, what about
That's
NPR?
the forum right there. You see the forum right there?
It's the
And what I'm
NPR
saying,
not
he said
moving.
that certain things that we were saying, YouTube was not allowing him to get on and say.
No, but that's because, and I won't go into broach the subject too much because I want this to be, to go out.
Right.
But I'll just say that they do not allow frank dialogue
No, you don't.
about COVID. That's all I'm saying, so I won't go too far down the road with it. At this point, right now, I could say
Yes.
that as of July 12th, 2022, they do not allow frank, balanced conversation about that. If you watch the Community Cop we did a few months ago, they harassed Layla Ali, world-class boxer, trainer, do videos on fitness and nutrition.
And cooking.
When she raised questions about the disease, how it came into existence, which Dr. Lewis can tell you all that stuff, and the irritated genie and others can get into that. And then about the vaccine, they called her kook. This sister is the sweetest sister you want to meet.
And that's-
Very
that was on
nice.
YouTube.
And-
I'm talking
and-
about-
So I'm just saying, in other words, they don't allow balanced conversation.
And I understand
That's all
that,
I'm saying.
but the point I'm
So we
making about
gotta
WAI,
get.
They were letting Gary Noel talk against the COVID. And
Oh,
that's the
yeah,
reason why
we know that.
That's why I brought it up.
Okay, but he got a whole different take on black folks.
Okay.
You know, he's so that's the main thing. You had your hand up, Ray?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, even when Latrice was there, they jumped on her like gravy on rice, and one thing she did used to do, all the books she used to get from Sababu, she used to make sure that he got the money for the books when they did the fundraiser. So
Does anybody else on
anybody else on Zoom,
Zoom?
got a question? Zoom audience?
Just quickly again, there was something I missed when you were talking about Martin's name change, and
Yes.
you said it was initially Michael King
Yes.
that he was named.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened was when he was 2 or 3 years old, his father went to Berlin with the group, the Baptist World Association. I think it's WBA, World Baptist Association. And while they were there, that's the country of Martin Luther, who started what would be called the Protestant religion. In other words, a breakaway from the Catholic religion, which was dominant at that time, where he tacked or nailed his thesis to the wall, to the door. So in that world gathering of people from all over the globe, he got caught up in that, and the person convinced him that he should name his son Martin Luther King. So he changed it from Michael to Martin Luther King, and subsequently changed his name from Michael King Sr. to Martin Luther King Sr. So that happened in the early 30s. And Dr. King was born in 29. So in the early 30s, after that convention, and that convention, actually, Hitler was there. Hitler spoke. He was just coming into power as a chancellor. He was coming up into power, and so in that environment, there was a lot of language around segregation and discrimination. And so he got caught up in it, him meaning Daddy King. Got caught up in that, and when he came back to the States, he changed his son's name, and he changed his name, and because he wanted the junior to be, to have that name, and so that's what happened. Why he allowed a white man to recommend what he named his son, it escapes me, because a white man should not be in a position to tell you anything about your son or make any kind of recommendation. But he followed suit on what the white group had recommended.
I guess thinking the Protestant Reformation and all of that, I guess thinking of that greatness on that Martin Luther, wanting that kind of, I don't know.
I'm just saying, if you wanted to make the glass half full, then if it makes you feel better, you can say he recognized greatness or gift in Dr. King at that early age and felt that he needed a more prominent name. If you want to just walk away positive, if not, then you have to think, why would you even entertain listening to any white man telling you what to name your son? Where his institutions, his whole lifestyle is a death sentence for you. So I don't know why he did it when he did it.
Is there a biography on Martin Luther King that would share the accurate information that you're sharing, that you could recommend us to read?
Well, I got about 7 or 8 books on Dr. King, and so you're going to get different information from different vantage points in each of them. So I couldn't give you one definitive book on him because it's been so many since the 50s, the early 50s. There's so many documentaries on him that I couldn't tell you where to start. But, read as much as you can, get as many documentaries as you can. And he's still, to this day, Andy Young and some people are still around. So if you can get some on-site information from them, it would be useful, regardless of what you think of Andy Young and other guys. They can give you personal accounts about MLK.
There was something also mentioned that I saw this, and I'm not sure if the irritated genie I'd seen it in one of his videos, so I won't say definitely one source or another, but it did come across, and this is a smaller thing. Did he date a white girl when he was going to a university
Well,
campus?
those are one of the things that I tried to get through the lecture without mentioning. But here's what. Not only did he date a white woman, he was going to marry her. His colleagues had to talk him out of it.
Who is this?
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
My man.
He was going to marry her. He fell in love with the woman and was going to marry her. And the truth be told, he was going to dump Coretta. If you want the truth, he was going to dump Coretta. His friends talked him out of it. Now this is while he was in college.
So he was dating Coretta at the time he met the white lady?
Well, why you want me to say all this? I said he was going to dump her, so he obviously was dating her.
Well, I'm just trying to be,
So,
Well,
yes,
he was
it's
just
true.
using her as a cover, maybe. While he was.
Well, see, because look, the facts is he was engaged to a white woman and was going to drop Coretta like a hot potato, but his friends talked him out of it and said, she is the one for you, and to leave that white woman alone because your path, which looks to be really rosy, and it's going to, he had a path of success in front of him, whether it was going to be as a teacher, whether it was going to be as a college president or as a preacher. But they knew that it will be detrimental if he married that white woman, and so they talked him out of it. But it is true, not only did he date her, he was engaged to her.
Wow. See, I didn't. I was just thinking it might have explained.
That's true.
Some of the extramarital affairs if he felt he didn't
He
get.
had extramarital
But anyway,
affairs.
that's just.
Yes, he had plenty of those.
That's light compared to what other people do.
He had plenty of those, but at least it wasn't no little boys. At least he didn't mess with no boys or no grown men. All of his situations were with women. Grown women, no underage women. All were grown.
Did Khalid Muhammad have a white woman also?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Never. Dr. Collins referred to white women as what they are, skunks.
Any other
Is that
questions?
it?
I was going to say, there's one thing that I noticed a lot of people don't mention when they talk about black empowerment back in the 30s. That was the all-black Negro boxing league. My grandfather was a light heavyweight champion in the all-Negro black boxing.
Well, they had that.
Yeah.
And obviously the most famous thing, well known, was the Negro Leagues.
Right.
The baseball.
Baseball was the main thing they talked about.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. But they also had credit unions. They also had black banks.
Yeah, they had that.
They had the activity of commerce.
Right.
On a smaller scale than what white folks had, but it existed.
Right.
Of course, our brothers from the Caribbean brought in susus.
Right.
So there was a nice admixture of things going on in the black community that white folks understood they wanted a piece of the action. Right. The numbers game, the policy game.
Right. Big time, the numbers.
Came from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
They took over it once they saw that those pennies add up. So, that's why Dutch Schultz,
Yeah.
gangster, did what he did. But I'm just saying that we had an economy that they wanted to break up because they understood it was that time.
That's right.
Okay, so Ray, we'll stop there.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Mike a great big hand. Zoom audience, thank you very much. We're going to be here 2 Wednesdays from now. Dr. Lewis is going to be the keynote speaker. He's going to run down economics. And he's probably going to talk a lot about health. Is that a go, Doc?
It's a goal.
It's a go. I want to thank the audience for coming out and supporting the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. Give Brother Mike a great big hand.
Thank you, Brother Michael.
You can unmute yourself and talk amongst the folks here and until I clean up the place.